So last time we did reduction for color printing. This time we're going to do multiple block. So an example of multiple block. So each color you see there is done on a separate block and then combined together to create the final image. So the blocks for this one.
You have to carve identical blocks?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Those are the 3 blocks for the owl.
Wow. So the first is the rest?
In terms of printing, I printed this first.
Okay.
This has been printed a few times for demos now, so
Yeah.
the colors have changed through time. So this one would be the base layer, then it's going to be the green.
Yeah, got it.
And then this, the final layer. So the advantage to doing multi-block is if you make a mistake on one layer, then you can just start over that one block instead of have to redo the whole image. So if you did reduction and you made a big, terrible mistake, then you'd have to start over because you're only using that one block. With this, you just take up that one block and then start again, that layer. You can also change colors. So once you got your blocks, they hold up pretty well over time. So you can do a purple owl, orange owl, whatever you want. The disadvantage is it's more time consuming. You have to carve 3 blocks, so it is more time consuming. I think I mentioned Picasso started working with multi-block. I think he did a few, and then he moved over to reduction because he found it a little more less tedious and more kind of spontaneous and intuitive for the way he works. And then the other thing is registration, lining things up. So you can use the flip method like I showed you last week, but it's okay for multi-block. I'll show you 2 types of registration methods that I use. I've shown people multi-block. So maybe I'll show this one first. Sure. So the first registration method is a traditional Japanese way of registering. It's called, so you're going to be using kento marks. So it rhymes with bento, starts with a K. So kento marks, so K-E-N-T-O. And these are the marks here. So there's a corner mark and then a center mark. So if you notice on each block, there are kento marks on each block. So basically the registration marks are carved into the block on each block. But they're always going to be the same relative to your image. So the nice thing is if your block's a little bit bigger, you can still use the same image because the kento mark is going to be in the same spot. So the inside the kento mark, so the inside that L and this here, that's the edge of your paper. That's where your paper is going to sit. So when we're printing, we're going to ink up our owl and then place our paper into here. And then we'll print that and then move it over to the next block. And
so the kento marks never have ink on them?
No, when you're printing, no. But when you're transferring the image, you want to make sure you transfer the kento marks on each block. So you can't just draw out the image and then add the kento marks. You can, but you have to be really careful with your measuring. It's better to carve it out and then transfer it onto different blocks. So traditionally what you can do, you can do one block with the kento marks, cut everything out, ink it up, and then print it onto wax paper, and then takes that wax paper and then transfer it onto other blocks because the ink won't stick to the wax paper. And you can do a transfer that way. Or else you can do a drawing that has the kento marks, photocopy it, and then do the oil wintergreen transfer. That's why I usually do it myself. Does the wax paper transfer make sense?
So you ink that?
Yeah, so you ink that, including the kento marks, for doing a transfer.
And then you take wax paper.
Wax paper, print on the wax paper, and because the wax paper has a waxy surface, the ink is not going to dry.
Then that gets you transferred to the next.
Yeah, then you take the wax paper, put it face down, rub it on the next block, and so forth. So you do it that way, or you do an oil wintergreen transfer, where you do a drawing with the Kento marks. But you want to make sure the Kento marks are in the same spot relative to the image on each block. They're not going to change. So if the block's a little bit bigger, that doesn't matter because that relationship between the Kento marks and the image is always going to be the same.
Does the wax paper go inside that mark or over top?
It would just like cover it completely. So this is an example of what I did with wax paper. So I ink up everything including the Kento marks, put it face down, and then print on the blank block just to transfer the Kento marks.
Okay.
So when using Kento marks for your paper, you want to make sure the paper is as square as possible. So it sits in the Kento mark for each one nicely. And you want to make sure the Kento marks are also cut nice and straight. So usually when I'm cutting the Kento marks out of the block, I use a knife, score it really deeply, and then use my U-gouge to cut against it to get a nice sharp clean line. Remember doing that in like first or second class? You want to make sure they're nice and clean and sharp. And then you want to make sure your paper is square, because even if it's like a little bit off, it'll affect the registration, it won't line up. So multi-block takes a little more, I think, prep work. So far so good. So then we can ink them up. So I can ink up this one. I do have 2 YouTube videos where I did this in my studio with the bird eyes point of view, so I can watch me register and print from above me, so it's probably easier to see and understand it. So yeah, when you're working on your blocks, usually the first one that you do is your key image. So this is my key image. This is the black layer. So usually for multi-block, you start with the key image, and then that gets transferred onto each block. So the key image is the one that you print the last. It's usually the one that you has most of the detail, kind of brings everything together, like the outline, the fine detail, and this owl. So it's the one you print the last, but the first that you carve, usually. So this is the one I use to transfer onto the other blocks. I'll just print 2 layers. Green. Any suggestions for colors?
Surprise us.
Oh, oh. So each block has different layers. So this one's a detailed area, and when you transfer it, then you decide on each block what you want that block to be. So this one's going to be the flat, that's going to be underneath the owl. This is going to be the background behind everything. So each one you need to kind of determine which one you want each block to be. So you might have one block where if you want to do the eyes a separate color, you're going to carve out everything but the eyes, because it's a separate layer. Some people, if they're doing a small detail like that, what they'll do is they'll carve enough of it so they use a small roller, small brayer, and just ink up the eyes. So rather than trying to carve away everything, they may carve just this amount for the eyes.
pretty.
it off. It's pretty.
It is.
Weird week.
So multicolor, you can use transparent colors, you can use opaque colors. The advantages with the multi-block is you can carve out blocks so the layers don't sit on top of each other. Like for example here, the flap that goes underneath the owl is not covering this background, so that background color can stay pure. So they don't have to overlap each other. They can. So my finished print here, the key image and the flap that's underneath the owl never goes on the background at all. So you can keep those separate. If you remember we did reduction, because you're using the same block over and over again, you're gonna get that layering. It's not bad or good, it's just, that's the way reduction works. Here, you can keep things very separate if you wanted to, or layer them. So you have more, I guess, options.
Do you usually do it on wood?
Do both. Test out your colors. No? No. You're right. Let's try to make a blue owl. Not bad, but maybe it's too dark. And that's why we test your colors. It's better. Blue and then dark on top. So depending on your image, you have to be careful to ink up. Like right now, my rollers cut some of this, so you have to be a little bit careful. So use a smaller brayer. Fan it out. start with my flat first. So I'm going to take my paper and fit it into those canto marks on the inside, like so. That. What do you do? I always forget to do the branch when I do this demo. You can see the registration is pretty good. So. You have to make sure the canto marks are nice and straight, and you have to make sure your paper is square. So, takes a little bit of prep time. So, multi-block with canto marks. And again, there's a video on YouTube I can send you. You can see everything being done.
A question.
Yes.
So when those blocks, when the ink are dry, you can put different color and just.
Yep. I think the owl's been purple and brown and maybe yellow even.
But does it affect the color once it's dry? No.
No, once it's dry, it's fine.
Oh,
So,
only
yeah.
when it's not dry, then it might affect the color.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, right now if I ink this up and if I try to yellow with the blue on there, it'll probably be green.
Okay.
And you just do these one on top of the other. You don't wait in between.
General rule of thumb, like I did this 2 layers. I think 2 layers is fine. More than 2 layers, then the color starts to strip off a bit. So I'll probably do 2 layers, let it dry, and come back the next day. So this one I know I did for this print. I did 2 layers and let it dry, and then did the final layer on top. So. So the other way to do it is using, I don't know what to call it. Yeah, like a registration jig or frame. So something like this. So I'm kind of taking those canto marks and then putting them outside the block. So this is made out of mat board. I have a few in my portfolio case if you want to borrow one. But basically it's just a L-shaped piece of mat board. If you wanted to make something more durable, you can make it out of wood. Use a table saw or MDF. So this allows you to work with blocks that don't have Kanto marks. So I guess the advantage there is, I guess, a little less carving. You don't have to cut out Kanto marks, and then you can vary the size of the paper. With the Kanto marks, once you put them into the block, then that's your paper size. That's the edge of your paper. So if you wanted a 2-inch border, you have to make the Kanto marks further out for the image. Here, your image goes right to the edge of the block, so you don't have to worry about it. So I did another owl. But this time, this is my key image. So again, I'm going to start with the image that I'm going to print last, that has most of the detail, that brings everything together, and carve that out first. And then transfer that onto each block. So I did this, I photocopied a print off of this, and then I transferred it onto each block using the oil wintergreen. So doing it this way, the trick is to get your blocks as close to each other in size as possible. I am not a carpenter. They're pretty good. They're a little bit off, so then your registrations could be a little bit off too. The way to avoid that is, or to lessen that, is to make sure when you do the transfer, you do the transfer from the same corner on each block. So.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Your overcoat, shawl, sweater, jacket.
Hand me down.
Oh, what?
Hand me down.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So if this is my photocopy,
Oh, I see.
I'm going to mark
Hand-me-downs is good.
Yeah.
the corner of one,
Yeah?
and then make sure I mark
Thank you so much.
the back of
Yeah.
the block, and then make sure. So mark it here, and then mark it here.
So you brought your laptop.
Yeah. So there's a mark back here, and there's a mark here. So I'm making sure that for each block, I'm always registering to that same corner on each one. So even if the block's off by like a millimeter, because it's coming from that same corner, then the registration shouldn't be too bad. So on each block, you're going to make sure when you do the transfer, you line up the corner on each one, the same corner on each one. If that makes sense. The idea is the same as the first method I showed you. You have a key image, and then on each block you decide what you want to do for it. So this one's a flat. Underneath the owl, plus a little bit of texture in the background. This is just a flat behind the owl completely. This has all been carved out. This is one that's just been transferred, and you can decide what you want to do with this one. So again, you might just want to do the eyes and the beak. So in that case, you'd have to carve out everything but the eyes and the beak, or carve enough out so you can roll it up properly with a small roller. But for each one, you decide what you want to do for each layer. But you're always working off that key image. And when you do the transfer, you want to make sure you line it up with that one corner consistently. And you get pretty decent registration. So when you're ready to print, you have this. Your block's going to sit on the inside part of the frame, like this. And then I've drawn out the edges of my paper. So I've given myself a 1-inch border. So my paper is going to sit like this here. So when I print, this will be down on the table. I'll have my block like that. And then my paper goes down like that. You can't do it just with the pencil marks. That's okay. If you want a more precise method to register, there's a couple options. You can take a piece of green tape. What I'm going to do is take the roll of tape and then take my knife and cut into it about, I don't know, 5 or 6 layers. So you get a thick piece of tape, and then you can carefully cut out tabs. And then you can use the factory side of the tape, so the side that you didn't cut, but this part here. And then line them up against those pencil marks that you use to mark your paper. So it gives you a little bit of a lip for the paper to be held onto when you're printing. So when you're printing, you can lay down your paper, and the thicker tape will kind of hold the paper there. If that makes sense. So it doesn't slip as much. Yeah, the chances of it slipping is less. So that's tape. If you want to get extra fancy, you can use registration pins. So these are registration pins. So we can use these along with registration tabs. So these are pieces of plastic that have been hole punched, so they fit into the raised part of the tabs, or pins, pardon me. So they sit in like that. And basically what we do with each piece of paper is you put 2 tabs on each piece of paper, like so. And this is easier to see from above. I'll try my best. So these are used for silk screening, or for lithography, and they can be used for relief printing. So let me shift a little bit. So it'll look like this. So you line up your paper with those pencil marks on your L-shaped piece of mat board. So, and then use just regular tape. And then tape down your pins. So, make sure your paper's lined up with those pencil marks, and then you can use the tape to tape down the tabs to the back of each piece of paper. So it'll look like something like this. And then you do that for each piece of paper. So you line up your paper with those pencil marks, take your tabs, put them in the pins. And you keep on going. So it goes like something like that. So when you're printing, all you need to do is take your paper with the tabs and then put them in the pins. And they should print to the same spot every time. So it's a really complicated way to do registration, I guess, a little bit. But they work really well, the pins. So you can use thick pieces of paper to hold things down. You can rely just on the pencil marks and hope the paper doesn't move, or else you can try the registration pins.
They do work well.
They do work well.
Yeah.
And Hues does
Sell them.
And
Yeah.
every time I teach the class, I lose my registration pins and packs, and I buy a new one. So
Yeah, because there's only 2 metal pins in that pack. There's
Yep.
hundreds of plastic.
So
Did you do that?
That's how I did it. I like doing it that way. It's, I still have the jig, you know, so you can.
So when you're printing, if you want to, you can tape down the jig to the table so it doesn't move. And then we ink up the blocks. So I'm gonna use the same colors. Same time. Room already. Guess without the cancel marks, the blocks might be a little bit easier to ink up because you're not trying to avoid non-image areas a little bit more. Now you're just inking up the whole block. Again, I'll start with my flat. If you want to really secure your block so it doesn't move, you can take those thick tape tabs. Kind of use them to lock your block into position. So on either side, and we take our paper with the tabs. And then we print. First layer, this. And swap out your block. Just put your paper with the restoration pins back on. restoration's pretty good.
Looks good.
Yep.
I like it.
So, again, for this method, you want to make sure the blocks are as close to the same size as possible. And then when you do the transfer to one corner, the same corner on each block. Yeah, this restoration system works pretty well. You can use this also for reduction if you wanted to. If you didn't want to do the flip method, you could use the restoration pins for that as well. So that's multi-block. I do have an example of jigsaw. I don't know if I have the print here though, so I can briefly talk about it and I can bring the example next week. Print one tonight. The other way to work with color is something called puzzle piece or jigsaw. And as the name implies, basically you take a block and you cut it up and you put it together like a puzzle when you're ready to print. So I carved this out as one block, and then I cut it into individual pieces to be inked up individually. So I guess the advantage of this is each piece is separate from each other, so that there's no layering whatsoever. So don't worry about that. And then again, they're separate pieces. You can change up the colors anytime you want to. So this is a landscape with mountains, and a lake, a sky. When you're cutting the blocks, lino I guess works best because you just use a knife. If you use wood, I guess you'd have to find someone with a saw or have a saw. When you make the cuts, you want to make sure that they're beveled. So you don't want to do a straight up and down cut. You want to bevel it at an angle. That way when you go to the press or on your printing table, when you put them together, they'll lock into place.
So you just have one beveled one way and the other one.
Yeah, so when you cut it, you do a bevel cut so that this angle's this way and this other one's going this way, and they lock in together. And for lino, it's nice because you can heat it. I would heat it if you're going to cut it out. So heat it and then make the cut. It'll be a lot easier than doing it cold. So either with a blow dryer or an iron, or you can stick it in an oven for a few minutes, a low temperature.
What kind of blade would you use just to cut it?
I just use an X-Acto knife. Yeah. And there's no backing on this one to make it easier to cut.
So that one you would have like different bands of color, but you wouldn't have it overlaid like how it is.
Yeah. I'll bring the example next week. Sorry, I had it in there, but it looks like it was left at school. We have a 1-hour level class right now that's doing relief printing, so I'm taking stuff away and bringing it back. But yeah. But I can ink it up even tonight. It's working. But it's a pretty straightforward idea. Basically, make an image and then you cut out the block and put it back together. So this one has 4 pieces. I've done one that had like 15 pieces. That takes forever to ink it put together. You can do 2 pieces. But the important thing is to make sure you have that beveled edge so they lock in.